Hi, good evening. I'm Paras Chaudhary, the lead programmer at Notting Hills Games, and today I'm going to talk about the tech of Raji. So, just to get you an idea, if you have not heard about the game, it's an action adventure game set in ancient India. We've been developing it since 2017, and we are hoping to release it by mid 2020. We are a small indie studio based out of Pune. And before we head into the actual talk, play a short trailer for you just to get an idea about how the game looks and feels before we start talking about its systems. So there were quite a lot of things I wanted to talk about, but considering the short nature of this talk, I've narrowed it down to these few. We'll talk about the camera system, the animation system that we have created with montages, the destructibles, both scripted and animated destructions that we have used, some tools that we have made through splines, and the audio system, which we recently moved on to FMOD, and some basic good practices just to make sure that your project doesn't blow up by the end of production. So let's talk about the camera system. Initially, whether you know it or not, the game was actually designed to be in Unity. And we did actually start developing it. We did develop it for a couple of weeks. Within the first couple of weeks, we realized that since the expertise of the team is in 3D, it's better to move on to Unreal. This was late in 2016 when we decided to make the switch. And initially, it was supposed to be a pure isometric, 2D isometric game. This is a screenshot from the demo that we put out in 2017. So as you can see in both the pictures, even though we moved on to a more conventional 3D camera, we still tried to stay true to the original look and feel that we wanted for Raji through a fixed camera. This is one of the first few tests that we did for Raji. Here, the biggest difference in the camera that we have right now and the camera that you see in this is we tried to actually mimic the orthographic camera by reducing the field of view of the camera. So you actually get that feeling of the game being 2D, even though it's in 3D. As we kept on going on, we realized that since we are using Unreal, why are we now limiting ourselves to pure isometric? And that is where this the system that we have right now, which we call a semi-dynamic camera system, that came into being. So what do I mean by semi-dynamic camera? It means that the player does, unlike say a conventional third-person game, where the player can control the camera with its mouse or keyboard. The player does not have that control over here, but still based on the movement of the character, where the character is in the game, the camera properties, rotation and translation, and even zooming in and out, that can change. I'll show you a quick video of one of the early passes. The way it started was that even though we wanted to have a fixed camera angle, we wanted to emphasize some of the areas in the game, say where we want the story to be impactful. In any unique scenario in the game, we would actually have that. So here you'll see that the camera is actually panning as Raji is moving forward, and it pauses into to this frame where you actually have this feeling of getting into that cave. That is the area, that is the pathway which you need to take. And this camera panning, it actually depends on the movement of the character. If the character moves back again, it will actually go back to the initial camera value that was there. This was the initial idea actually. The way we started with the semi-dynamic camera system, and as we kept on using it, we realized that not only can we use it to focus on the environment, we can actually use it to direct the player towards, say, an objective or towards the path that needs to be taken. It actually turned out to be a really good level design tool as well, because the level designer, he didn't have to limit himself a literally linear path in the level while making the block out. Say in a fixed camera angle, you are kind of limited when you're placing the paths, because you cannot go behind. I mean, there's a really big chance that your character might get occluded by some geometry, and that kind of limits the game design, the level design element. So what we did was we used this thing to create levels and then rotate around the geometry so that you actually have freedom for level design as well. The initial part of the trailer that was played, and in the video also, you saw the in-game view. This is the editor view. So this is how our camera system looks like. You see there are a few boxes with from and to labeled, and these are basically the building blocks of our camera system. It's quite straightforward actually once you get to know how it works. It's basically a box trigger, and I have picked two faces, one with the from value and one with the to value. So when the character actually enters from one of the faces or the from value, it interpolates the value of the camera translation and rotation while the character is inside that trigger. And the moment the character leaves the to side of the trigger, those values get retained. These camera boxes, they actually follow a particular sequence. So the to value of the first camera box that you see, it will be the same as the from value of the next camera box, so that you can actually keep taking the values forward. This is just a debug look of how it actually works. So just to make sure that while Raji is moving sideways, the values don't change, I had actually limited the lerping to go only to take only the center of the faces. Okay, one thing that I missed out was that the sphere that you see, that is the actual value of, say, an alpha. We call this an alpha. When you lerp a value from 0 to 1, say that is your alpha. So from the from side to the to side, since that sphere is moving, when it's near the from side, it's closer to the 0 value. And when it's near the to side, it's closer to the 1 value. And when you get this lerp alpha, it's very trivial to actually just set a timer on every tick, lerp the values. Say over here, I'm changing the rotation value. If I want the camera to pan down a bit, I can simply use this lerp alpha to change the value. And based on wherever Raji is going in the camera box, that alpha value will keep changing, and you will get this smooth transition of say rotation or zooming in and out. You can change the spring arm length. You can add a location offset as well, where Raji is no longer at the center of the screen, the thing that you saw in the first video, where she was approaching the lion cave. And once actually we got this done, we got this system made, we realized that we need not limit it only to the camera system, because it's just a lerping value. You can use it for so many things, like we did for lighting and post process as well as audio. So over here in this scenario, when Raji actually enters the lion cave, it's actually a cave. You're going indoors. So over there, this tool actually helped us to seamlessly modify the lighting and post process values as well to match those of an indoor cave. All right, that was it for the camera system. Let's head to the animation system. In the animation system, we are relying heavily on montages actually. And the way we are doing it is that, in this case, we're talking about an attack. The first attack Raji does, you hit left click, Raji does an attack. So how does that work? For every attack animation, there are two endings to it. The animator makes it in such a way that there are two endings to it. So there can be a normal attack, and if the player doesn't click another button, the character Raji will come back into the recovery state. But while she's doing the first attack, if you click again, she'll transition into the second attack. So there is this sweet spot in the animation which we take a particular frame from where we branch out into two animations. So this is the first attack which I was talking about, that there is the attack, and the moment she reaches the final point, there is a wind down, which is the recovery animation. So these are two separate animations. While she's at the topmost point with the Trishul, if you click again, she'll actually, instead of going into the recovery, she'll go into the second attack and then into the second recovery. And similarly, if you keep chaining the attack, it will go into the third attack instead of going into the recovery of the second attack. So this is how we made the attack system so fluid that we created two separate ending animations, so that based on the player action, or rather the action not being there, she would go into the recovery animation or the next attack animation. And this thing, once you get it done, you can actually loop it indefinitely. If I keep hitting my left mouse button, she will never go into the recovery state, because we have added this small animation which connects the third attack to the first attack. So you can actually keep mashing the button and you won't even see the cuts in the animation. Apart from the montages that we are using for attacks and platforming capabilities, there is another thing that we are using quite heavily, which is layered blend per bone. Layered blend per bone does, it allows you to play different animations on different parts of the character's body. So here you can actually see there is this layered blend per bone node, and on the right hand side you can I don't know if you can read it or not, I'll read it out for you. There is a base pose and there are two blend poses. One of them takes the animation from anything above the anything below the hip animation, and the other one takes animations which are playing anything above the spine animation. So here you can actually use this thing. I don't have the clip for that, but Raji has a secondary attack where she throws the Trishul. So what the animator did was he created a throw animation where Raji is standing idle. But what I was able to do with this system was that I was able to play the walking animation on the lower part of the body, so that even when Raji is moving around, she can use that animation and she can throw the Trishul even while running. The other thing that's there is blend poses. Blend poses. I mean, you can use a boolean over here, an integer or an enum. But what essentially it does is it's basically a switch. So in case you want to play a certain animation when a certain condition has met, you can do easily with that, and we'll see how that is done. In this video, you'll see this in action where there is a layered blend per bone node, and what it's doing is it's playing everything that is coming from the pre-final pose of Raji, and then it's adding a head rotation animation on top of her. And whenever I have the look around boolean true, whenever I want Raji to look around in the environment, I just set this to true, and you'll see how this actually works. Right now she's idle. I'll increase her speed, and as she's running around in the level, she's just walking straight. But if I want her to feel more lively, if I want her to look around, I can simply check this and she'll just start looking around. Please don't mind her ponytail because we use a physics asset for that. So here you'll see that she is starched out. So yeah, this is also another thing that we use for regular movement. So anything that is related to platforming or attacks or any specific actions that Raji does, we use montages. And for regular running around, we rely on the layered blend per bone and blend poses quite heavily. That was it for the animations. Let's head on to destructibles. So we have two kinds of destructibles in the game. One is the thing that comes out of the box with Unreal, which is Apex, the Apex plugin that we use for destruction. And the other one that is something which is actually nothing but an animation being played. So what you do is that you play something breaking down in Max or Maya, and then you export it as animation, and then you can play it in the level. I'll get to the significance of each and where one is more useful than the other. So here you'll see the first thing, the way we are using Apex destruction to create this sense of jump scare or tension in the level. The green platforms that you saw, they are actually tagged as destructibles. And how destructibles in Apex work is, I mean, the way we are using it is that we are putting them into destruction triggers. So here what you see is there is this mesh and there is this square box trigger, which whenever the character collides with it, it actually triggers the destruction. And the spheres that you see, they are the areas which will actually get the damage. So instead of destroying the mesh completely, destroying the platform completely, we have localized the damage, and the numbers that you see on top of it is the delay. I mean, one after the other, how it will get destroyed. So instead of it getting destroyed all at once, we have kept a delay that, I mean, say the 0 means that it'll get destroyed immediately. Then the rest will have a delay of 0.2 seconds or 0.4 seconds. So while with playing around with these values, we actually get quite a good result, as you saw in the previous video. Let's get to the scripted animations. Here you'll see a video that we did for one of the levels in Raji. This is purely in the blockout stage. Here, all the animation, all the destruction that you see, it's purely pre-baked animations. There is nothing happening in real time. And the reason why we chose to go with this and not with Apex is because of the sheer size and the scale of the things that we want to destroy. First of all, it will be quite heavy for Apex, and secondly, since Apex is purely physics based, I'm pretty sure you guys have encountered your character flying to the abyss just by colliding with one physics actor. And that happened a lot with us, and that's why we came up with this thing. It's actually quite light on computations as well, and it actually helps us to create a bigger scale of destruction if the story wants it. Here you'll actually see the way a pillar is destroyed. It's just a simple animation being played. And the beautiful thing about this is I can actually scrub through it. I can actually reverse it as well. And we use this thing in one of the puzzles that we have in the game. We call this a demon tree. And what happens in this is you're actually rotating this and you're bringing the environment back to life. Actually playing the animation, I'm just taking the values and I'm scrubbing through it. And it actually gives me that feeling that by rotating something, I'm actually reconstructing a part of the environment. Right, Spline tools. Spline tools is something that I personally really like. I mean, Spline in general, the way Unreal has implemented it. Briefly touch a few tools that we have made for Spline. We are not using splines heavily in gameplay, but we have made these small tools in Unreal where they can maybe help art or maybe VFX or maybe some kind of supporting thing rather than gameplay itself. I call it the random deviation spline system. The white line that you see, that is the actual spline. And based on that spline, there are numerous other splines that have been auto-generated by the engine. Let's see how it is actually made before we see how it's useful. So it's a simple spline that you use in Unreal. And once you actually have a loop that you're satisfied with, you actually set the number of splines that you want, the extra splines. And then you just create like a random number. So it will generate random splines within that range around the main spline. I'll show you a couple of examples, what we have done with it. You can have butterflies. With just a few variations in the speed, you can actually have a really natural looking flock of butterflies, or rather anything that you can think of that could actually go well with this. Something that runs in a flock, it'll be really nice to have that implemented using this thing. So there is butterflies, and recently we implemented schools of fish also. It's just a very small, very basic model of the fish, and it has a very basic animation of the tail wagging, but the majority of the task is being done by the spline. So this is something that we can use in support with the actual environment that we have to make it a bit more lively and a bit more dynamic. Apart from that, this is something that I keep experimenting with even in my personal time. I keep putting in geometric equations in Spline. So here you see that there is a helix. Actually try a lot with splines. If you just need to figure out how to get the mathematical formula into blueprints or into C++ and create a spline of that shape. So you can actually have helix. If you want to go too crazy, you can have spheres as well with multiple splines. You can have circles, basic shapes. And these basic shapes, then you can use it in any way that your game requires you to use it. Okay, this is something where I'll have to switch to the engine because I really want you all to hear the audio system. So we recently moved to FMOD. I'm not sure if everybody knows about FMOD. It's a tool that integrates really well with known game engines, Unity, Unreal for us. And it actually gives us a lot of power to create dynamic audio. Now, what do I mean by dynamic audio? It means that I can actually change the music or the ambience that is in the level in the game based on a game situation. If the game is grim, if Raji realized something which made her sad, the music can actually change, and it'll change in such a way that you won't feel that I have played a separate music track. It'll actually add or subtract different music tracks, different music instruments in sync with the beat and in sync with the tempo, and you won't realize that a separate track has started playing. Alright, so this is the area that I was using for my previous videos, so I thought that maybe I'll use this thing again. So right now you're hearing wind, you're hearing rain, you're hearing ambient birds as well. And the moment I head into the cave, I head inside the cave, there is actually a trigger that actually changes the ambience into that of a cave. And if I actually hit back, so this is, an example of the ambience. You'll feel the power of FMOD more when there is music involved. So let's see what we can have for the music. I don't have FMOD with me right now, but I do have one track that we exported through FMOD and which we have in the engine. I'll just show you what I meant by dynamic audio. Let's see if it works. All right. Over here, I'm not sure if it's visible. I'll read it out for you. These are the names that you see. They are different musical instruments. We call them stems. So there is, say, a track for sarangi. There's a track for bass. There's a track for sitar, sitar chords, tabla, a lot. And the values that are assigned to it are their volume levels. So if I just, say, turn one of them up, there's bass. So this is how it'll start. And say if I want to add tabla to it, even if I add it right now, it won't start playing till it actually matches the beat signature. So if I turn it on, it just started playing with the beat. And that's how you can actually modify your music track in-game to actually relate more to the story that is going on in the game. Well, it sounds really nice. Let's just see what all we can do with it. So our sound designer, he recently started working with Unreal, and it was actually my job to make sure that he gets Unreal. And since we are on a really big time crunch when it comes to the release, it was quite a bit of nightmare to work with him because he was literally working in Unreal for the very first time. But the moment he saw FMOD, he was totally in his zone because he's a pro in Ableton, and FMOD, it actually resembles a lot in terms of functionality and controls. So he didn't know a lot about Unreal, but he managed to give us this. Let's see what we have. Actually turned me into a DJ. I mean, when I'm working, sometimes I actually instead of putting background music to work on YouTube or on SoundCloud, sometimes I actually just turn this on and I just play around with the stems, and it just gives me a really nice feel. Okay, this part of the talk, it was quite unnecessary, but I just thought I'll just have it because these are some of the problems that I personally face. Just realized the music is too loud. So, see, when we started working on this project, we were a measly team of 4 people. Quickly, it became 5. So, when we began, we had no idea how big the size of the project will become or how big the scope of the project will become. And it was that small mistake on our part which we're actually quite, we are suffering till now as well. There are a lot of systems that I made almost 3 years ago, and they are being used as is, because even if I go close to them to clean them up or to optimize them, something or the other blows up. And honestly, we don't have we don't have time for critical failures. So I realized, and this is something I started doing eventually when I realized how important it is to actually have timely code cleanup. When we started, it was I started with blueprint prototyping. For this game, because it was quick. We wanted to see results, and the blueprints, they were messy. And then I got this idea that why don't I just say have one day in the month or 2 days, one day in a fortnight where I clean that messy blueprint into something clean, and then eventually when I have time, I transfer all of that blueprint code into C++, because honestly, blueprints, first of all, the same kind of computations that you do in blueprints, you can do it in a fraction of time in terms of game milliseconds in C++. And that's why if it's possible for you to code into C++ directly or move your code from blueprint to C++, do that, because it'll help. It'll go miles and miles when you're doing optimization for you. So yeah, this is just one of the examples of the mess that I made. So this is probably a 2.5-year-old blueprint. It started off as something small. This is the logic for the first attack system that you saw in the animation. And as time kept on going on, we kept on adding more things. Say she needs to attack when she's dodging as well. She needs to attack when she's wall running as well. And before I knew, it was such a big chaos. And before I had the time to fix all of this, I realized that there's a second weapon coming in. And this line goes to the second weapon of the bow and arrow. But eventually I got the time to clean this up, and I moved this code to C++ eventually, and this code it's barely 100 lines of code. But the amount of time it took me, because it was in this state, to get to C++, it was insane. So it's actually better if you keep doing it in intervals and stop lying to yourself that you'll do it later, you'll clean it up later. Yeah, these are some small things. We're using SVN for version control, and it's really, I cannot emphasize the fact how important it is to write logs. It might seem unnecessary 10-15 seconds that you put when you put something in version control, but trust me, say when you're a solo programmer working on this, or rather even if you're in a team, after you say get back to a particular thing to fix it after 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, you won't realize what you actually did, or if something goes wrong, if you have to revert back to a previous revision. This actually goes miles. It's more like insurance. I'll say that you don't actually need it till the time you actually need it, and that is a time when you lose so much that you wish you had done that before. Code readability, basic naming conventions and hierarchy. This is also something that we didn't foresee before, and even though we got most of the things right, it's really important to have a specific naming conventions for all the different assets in your game, because even if you're a small team, if new people keep joining in, so naming conventions and hierarchy are important. With that, I conclude.